Good evening, dear educators. This is Dr. Farzana Shakil Ali from Urja Pedagogy Enhancement Program, an initiative of Kriti Prakashan Private Limited, welcoming you all to today's online training session. Kriti Prakashan Private Limited is a Lucknow based publishing company which began its operation in the year 2000. Having firm faith in its motto that is shaping nations through education, the company has spread its wings of knowledge pan India and abroad during its journey of 21 glorious years. Apart from publishing quality content for children, our vision statement also includes updation of teachers and educationists by empowering them through capacity building trainings and workshops twice a year. Our initiative Urja, Pedagogy Enhancement Program, focuses on empowering educators in teaching pedagogies in alignment with National Education Policy 2020, Learning Outcomes by NCERT, and Bloom's Taxonomy. We are glad to share that our Urja training series for the session 2021-22 has already started on 15 July 2021 and it will continue till 7th of August and will include all the trainings on teaching pedagogies of all different subjects including early childhood care and education as well. Today we have capacity building workshop on pedagogy of teaching geography to middle level students, and certainly the teachers are going to get some very good ideas to be implemented in their classrooms. What I believe is that if you want your students to learn, then everyone in the school system must continue to learn. So, inspire your students by being a role model. Today, we have with us Mr. Arun Prasad Wahi as a resource person for today's training. Mr. Wahi is a gold medalist in geography at the master's level from the Kumaon University, Nainital. Arun Prasad Wahi has been a popular teacher for social science at the secondary level and geography at the senior secondary level. After serving as a teacher for 1.5 decades, Mr. Wahi worked as a school principal before pursuing his passion to create teachers' resource material based on his subject knowledge and rich classroom experience. He has been a quizmaster for over a decade. Mr. Wahi is currently an independent consultant for developing educational digital media and teachers' resource material, as well as a resource person for conducting teachers' workshops. We welcome you on board, Mr. Arun Prasad Wahi, and we look forward to an enriching session from you. And as you have written, you have been a popular teacher. I like that word popular teacher because unless and until students like their teacher, they do not like the subject. This has been the experience which I always keep telling my team of teachers. So over to you, Mr. Wahi, and we look forward to something valuable from you.
Thank you, ma'am. Uh, my thanks to the people who are watching, and I'm quite sure that I'll be able to give whatever best I have in store for you. So, I begin today's presentation with a quotation by Professor Patricia Cross. So, present, the quotation is coming onto your screen now. Uh, yes, so here it is. Now, Professor Patricia Cross retired 25 years ago from the Department of Education, and she still continues to be a professor emeritus at the University of California, Berkeley. From her years of experience, she gives a simple mantra which you can read in this slide here. Teaching without learning is just talking. So, if you are teaching and there is no learning outcome, then you've just been talking. And therefore, it becomes very essential that what we are teaching has to induce learning. And today's presentation or today's training module is based entirely on that, in line with the NEP 2020. So, based on the NEP 2020, this training module is aimed at helping you to hit the bullseye on your target. So here comes the arrow, a little offhand, only from the other side, unfortunately. But this is our aim. Now, in this teaching module, we have a dozen key points. So I'll just very quickly introduce you to the key points of this training module. And here we go. The key points of this training are the icebreaker, what you know and what you don't know about the children, then the relevance of studying the subject, then approaches to study and teach, then strategy and pedagogy. Based on the strategy and pedagogy, we will be taking up lesson planning, and then we have to take up the integrated approach of linking subjects with our subject geography, which is part of the social science. Then we move on to the learning objectives achieved, and then designing activities for experiential learning. This is something which is slightly new, and maybe you may be knowing about it. Then assessing for learning, and assessing the learning. So first you have to assess the child whether he is ready for learning, and then if he is once he has learned, how the learning outcome has been for that. So there will be two segments of assessing, and then we take a quick feedback, how to take that, and then smart resource and time management, and finally some tips on coping up with the teaching challenges in line with the NEP 2020. So the first and the foremost thing here is that we must understand what NEP 2020 has for the teachers. That means what kind of teaching is required under the 2020. There are some points here which are coming up, and these are the key points, NEP key points for teachers. Now you can see here the aim. So the aim, as you can see, has been shown with an electric bulb. You can see the icon of an electric bulb, and the word aim is written there. Now, the aim means that you have to ideate, you have to bring around ideas so that you prepare holistic and well rounded individuals equipped with the 21st century skills. So, please remember, what we did 10 years ago or 20 years ago, or maybe what I did in my time, is not relevant anymore. What is relevant here is that the child is coming from a background where he is handled uh, mobiles, he has handled laptops, he has handled all different kinds of hardware which are available, and he is very good at mobiles. So, with that, and how best he can learn the subject and be a holistic and well rounded individual, that is the aim of teaching. Now, to pursue this aim, teaching has to be interactive. So, there you can see icon there, shaking hands. You have to shake hands with the child to make teaching interactive with fun, creative, collaborative, or experiential learning. The third point here is the study content is to be reduced to the core essentials and focusing on key concepts and applications. What is most important is application here. Because if the child has studied something and if he is able to apply that, for example, I'll just give you a very short example. I'm taking a little more time on this slide. That if the child understands at the class 6, 7, and 8 level that the dew doesn't fall from the sky, it forms on the leaves. I think your teaching has been applied very well by the child. So this is just a small example, and we'll be taking up something more. Now, the next point here is language. According to the NEP 2020, the NEP 2020 says what is more important is that communication should be perfect. And so a bilingual communication using the local or the home language, Hindi चाहे और कोई प्रांतीय भाषा हो उसका भी आप प्रयोग करें पर अपनी बात आप बच्चों को समझा सकें. That is very, very important. So bilingual communication can be used. It all depends on the type of children that you have in class. The next point is about culture. Now, integration of Indian culture in teaching. And then we have the last point, and that is outing, that is educational visits, enrichment activities, quizzes, arts and crafts, etc. These have to be planned regularly by the teachers, and therefore these are the NEP key points for teachers. Now we move on to the icebreakers. So let us have a look at the icebreakers. The first thing is icebreaker in the class is guess. So children will have to guess what is geography. So give them a chance to guess what geography is. Then you move on to the second point. Know how and when did geography develop as a subject. Now this is something which you have to tell them. That you can first question them what their knowledge is, and then you introduce how geography and when did geography develop as a subject. And then the third point is how is geography as a subject useful nowadays? Now, this is the understanding point, and you have to take it from the children that how is geography useful? And I think if you are getting the answer where a child stands up, some smart guy stands up in the class and says, "Sir or ma'am, if we use geography as a subject nowadays, when we look at the Google map and we are looking at a location and we are hunting for a place which where we have not been." Now, that is the point where you can easily imbibe that the child understands how geography as a subject is useful nowadays. Now, number four point is to learn how may geography be defined most simply. So when you ask this kind of a question, there will be n number of answers, and then you have to give them the answer. That geography basically is the study of the earth as the home of man. And then last point here is analyze how is geography related to other subjects of study. I think once again, if you ask this kind of a question in a class, whether it is offline or online, and you are bound to get many answers, and you have to moderate these answers to make them analyze in the right direction. Now, with the icebreakers, we move on to the next slide, and that is what is the relevance of studying geography. Now, if these things are not clear in the mind, then geography normally appears to be a burden to many of the children. Now, this is the kind of feedback that I have been getting for almost 15-20 years. That sir, और तो सब ठीक है मगर geography में वो मजा नहीं आता कभी कभी. So initially, if the relevance of studying the subject is very clear, then I am very sure that children would be able to appreciate what you are teaching them, and they will also be able to remember this. Now, here we have 5 points and a road linking these 5 points about the relevance of studying geography. The first one is the role of geography in our daily lives. How is geography useful to us in our daily lives? The knowledge of geography, the very fact that you are able to locate a place on Google Map, that is the beginning and the most simple answer of saying the role of geography in our daily lives. Then geography and our local and native area. So geography is the study of the earth as the home of man. So when we are living there, the local or the native area, you are actually talking about geography. Then geography and our knowledge of our country. Obviously, children have been studying in class 3, 4, and 5 about India and about different aspects of geography in India. So they would understand the geography and the international understanding and the geography in the world, how it is related and how it is important, and then geography and our culture, how culture is also related to geography because most of our habits and many of the things that we do, even if you have a look at the festivals in India, they are harvest festivals, and the harvest festivals are different in the north and different in the south. The reason being that the harvest practices are different, the climate is different, and therefore geography is related also to culture. Now we move on to the next thing, and that is what are the approaches of studying geography. So now the approaches of studying geography, there are 5 major points. The first point is relate day-to-day life facts known to students with scientific, that means subject knowledge. So if you are able to relate what the child can see in his day-to-day movement with the subject, I think the approach to geography becomes easier. For example, we can relate what happens when it begins to rain what happens if there is too much of rainfall, all these things, or else if it is becoming very hot, why it is become, why you are sweating more in summer, anything of this sort, where you can relate day-to-day facts with scientific knowledge, that is your purpose is solved. Then you have to show them relevant media presentation to align the focus of the students to the subject. So relevant media, there are the National Geographic is full of it, and then there are so many other channels. Those videos are available on the YouTube, and nowadays they are available on IPTV, Internet Protocol TV. So there is no dearth of material. All you need to do is to find out and hunt out the correct material and to show it to them to make it more applicable. And then you have to provide facts, and these facts should, increase the curiosity of the child so that he should say, I want to know more about the subject. So if the child is able to say that I want to know more, yes, how did this happen? I'll just give you an example. This is a personal, you can say I'm sharing a personal example. I remember I was teaching about Europe in one particular class, and naturally, none of us had gone abroad. So, students, or even at that point, myself. So, it was just it had to be taught to them. Europe had to be taught to them that it is accessible by railways. So, I reminded the children about a film, Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge. So I asked the children, I said, how many of you have seen Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge? This is very many years ago. So they said, yes, sir, I've seen. So I said, how do the hero and the heroine move out of England and on to their European tour? So, and where do they meet? So the answer, most of them knew the answer. Sir, they met at the railway station. So I said, there you are. So the railway station is the key point to connect different places in Europe. So you have to provide facts so that they want to know more. Then the fourth point is to initiate a brief class discussion on varied ideas of the subject along with the students. So let them also give their own ideas, and then you can always moderate. And then you have to summarize subject content in sync with the approaches used. So these are the different approaches of studying the subject. And now we move on to the strategy and pedagogy. So this is the first point, or you can say the first slide. We'll have two slides on this segment. The effective strategy that needs to be in sync with the guidelines laid down in the NEP 2020. I repeat once again, use bilingual approach, including bilingual teaching and learning materials. Now, I would wish to remind the teachers that since time, quite some time, I think maybe in the 80s, Kendriya Vidyalaya used to use bilingual approach in teaching social sciences and particularly geography and history. So today, the NEP 2020 gives a clear guideline that if the children are not able to understand and we continue to harp on English, then maybe they may have rote knowledge about the subject, but they will never be able to, like the subject or participate, or they will never be becoming creative, and that is very very essential. So bilingual approach is the way to open them and to connect them with the teaching. Now the next thing is the digital. To introduce the digital face of the subject, such as the GIS and its advantages. Now, most of you may be knowing what GIS is. That is Geographical Information System. Now, today GIS is being used by the government of India also to link various aspects of government plans along with the geographical area. So the data on agricultural production, the data on soil, the data on water resources, all this is being interlinked, and this can be mapped. And this is what geographical information system is all about. So this is the digital interface of the subject. And similarly, there are a lot of digital things. Even Google Map that you see on your phone is also a digital interface of the subject. Now we move on to the next thing, and that is the interlink. You have to highlight the interlink between geography and other subjects. Now, Geography, interestingly, is linked with every subject, and I think if you know geography well, or you can very well interlink them, interlink different subjects with geography. For example, I'll just give you a small example. Weather, everybody knows, is part of geography. Agriculture is part of geography and also economics. Then, industrial production, mineral mining, you name it. Everything is interlinked with geography because our natural resources and then the secondary resources all are made from what nature gives us. And the study of the earth as the home of man is what geography is all about. Now, the last point I come on to, and that is analytical. You have to create space for critical thinking and analysis based learning. So, children should be able to analyze and should be able to think critically what you have taught. Now, we move on to the strategy and pedagogy, the second segment of this part, and that is suggested pedagogy to meet the NEP 2020 strategy commitments. Number one point, reference. Use net references to augment standard pedagogy. Now, the standard pedagogy may be what I am doing, I'm talking, but at the same time, I am also illustrating. And you have to use references. Now, references here means you can use newspaper cuttings, you can use posts which are on the net, you can use a plethora of information which is available in line with the topic that you are teaching. So you have to augment, and then what happens is that gives credibility to what you are teaching, and the children are also able to correlate the facts of everyday life with their subject. The second point here is to conduct group study. Now, group study is something which used to take place in teaching English, but I think group study is one of the best ways and is the most recommended way of covering topics along with the entire class, where you make the children, all children of the class are active. Now, in a group study, the class children are divided into 5 to 6 groups of 5 to 6 students, each depending on the strength of the class. Incidentally, group study is also being conducted by certain schools during online teaching. They have small groups where parents and the children interact with each other before they can make up something which is to be presented during the class hours. So, group study is that the whole lesson or the topic that you are having is divided into several parts and given to groups, and the groups do research work and study work and illustrations they prepare, and finally all this is pulled in presence of the teacher. Now the third thing is to demonstrate, use globes, use maps, use weather instruments, etc. to demonstrate. I think most of the geography teachers do that. Other than map and globe, please also show them instruments, and you can, if instruments are not available, you can show them videos from YouTube. Then we have field study, organized visits to gardens, farms, industries for experiential learning. You know, hands-on activity here in geography would not be complete without the children actually visiting the certain place and seeing the geographical factors or the economic factors working in sync with the environment. And then the fifth point is to plan activities such as quizzes, poster making, song, skit, etc., and it becomes all the more interesting. So now we move on to lesson planning. Now, lesson planning is based on the strategy and the pedagogy. So I was just explaining to you group study. You have to break down the lesson into 5 to 6 parts for distribution among students for group study. So if one aspect of India is being studied by one group, the other group can study the other aspect, third aspect, fourth, fifth, like this. And then in the presence of the teacher, they share their collected knowledge, and then according to the syllabus and the requirements, the teacher moderates, and this is how group studies are conducted. Now, the second point is multimedia. Suitable multimedia reference, multimedia clips should augment textual content. If multimedia clips are not there, if illustrations are not there, then the child may not be able to form the right kind of idea in his mind. So therefore, multimedia, and these days, but there's no doubt of multimedia, it's available in abundance. Then we have to cite references from the net, such as from Wikimedia or Wikipedia, the Government of India, YouTube, or extended study. Then assignments. Now, assignments is something which is old, but you prepare assignments involving real life information from family, community, etc., in sync with the text. So assignment should not be that okay, make a chart, or assignment should not be just take a map and mark five things on the map. That is not assignment. That is homework. Assignment should be where there is a greater involvement, and this involvement should be where there is interaction between the child, between the student, and the surrounding area and the people, so that there is some kind of research work at the child's level, which comes forth after the assignment. Now, the local names of places, objects, materials should be used wherever possible so that it becomes easy for children to understand. Now, I have given here an example of pumpkin. It's called kaddu, kumla, sitapal. So, no matter whether you call it kaddu or kumla or sitapal, it means the same thing. But depending on what local name is being used, that should be shared while teaching the subject so that the children understand what we are talking about. Now, as we move further, we come on to the integrated approach of teaching the subject. So, in the integrated approach, the first thing is the Vedic science. Now, Vedic science is very, very important, and it is the Vedic scientists have contributed greatly to the knowledge of geography, to the knowledge of astronomy, and scientists such as Aryabhat. I've given one example. What they have done, what their contribution has been, how distances, etc., were calculated, and what is the Vedic science, what has to say about the geography of a place. Now, another example other than the Vedic science is about if you can correlate and tell them about Kalidas. Now, Kalidas's literary work describes the geography of central India. So, these kind of things should be made, uh, you can say, should be communicated to the children so that they are able to understand and they are able to appreciate our culture and our ancient knowledge. Now, the next point is integration with pure sciences like astronomy, astrophysics, climatology, etc. Now, when you are integrating geography with pure sciences, you have to make a line, you have to give the demarcation line as to where geography ends and the other subject or details of the subject begins. For example, I'll just give an example. We talk about minerals. Now, minerals, where they are found, what is their use? Now, when we talk about what their use of minerals is, or what is their resource value, we are talking of economics. But when we are talking of prospecting of minerals and in which layer of the earth they are found, we are integrating it with geology. Similarly, when we are talking of the stars, the sun, and the moon, we're down in class 6, we are actually talking of astronomy and astrophysics. Similarly, in class 7, when we are talking of climate, we are talking of rainfall regimes, we are talking of relative humidity, absolute humidity, we are talking of climatology. So there is a slight difference when between detailed climatology and the use of climatology in geography. So we have to draw a line and we have to tell the children about the correlation between different subjects and geography. Now, similarly, in case of applied sciences, now in applied sciences, we have weather forecasting, we have mineral prospecting, we have seismology, and we have disaster management. All these are applied sciences. and they are very, very important. For example, the knowledge of tsunami and its how it occurs is given to the children in geography. The example, the earthquakes and what are the earthquake waves and what is seismology, that is part of seismology. Then mineral prospecting, as I said, is part of geology, and weather forecasting is science of climatology, and these are also applied science. Now, the next point is economy and trade. So, the integration with agriculture, mining, forestry, industries, and trade. So, when we are talking of resources, what are resources and different kinds of resources that are available, natural, man-made resources. We are actually talking of geography as well as economics. So we are talking of economic geography. But at the same time, when we talk of mining and forestry and industries and trade particularly, then we are talking of economic geography and also of commerce. But at the same time, it is related to geography. Then we move on to the next point, and that is government policy. Now, integration of demography and the government policies on infrastructure and economy, these policies are also related to geography. For example, when we talk about our achievements, that now the highways in India have been developed very widely. We have the Golden Quadrilateral in the east, north, south, east, west corridor. These highways are built on the international standards, and there are no railway crossings and railway gates, etc. So there is free flow of traffic. Now, when we are talking of this, and then the government is providing subsidy to agriculture, the government is giving inputs for agriculture. Now, all these government policies are related to geography. The child should be able to understand what kind of government policy is applicable in his or her area and what is the general approach of the government as far as this policy is concerned. And then the last point here in the integrated approach is folk art and music, as I told you earlier also, that the role of geographical factors on literature, folk art, music, dance, etc. I told you an example of Kalidas. So Meghadutam, if the Meghadutam describes very vividly the regional geography of central India, Madhya Pradesh and these surrounding areas. And similarly, you will find that folk art, as you can see the Kangla School of Art, and you see the different schools of art, uh, the impression that you see in their paintings is very much influenced by geographical factors. Similarly, in literature, similarly in music, and in dance, there are so many dance forms available which can be seen in India, starting from the northeast, very, very unique kind of dance forms. Going down into the south, you will find that the entire cultural landscape is actually dependent on the geographical landscape. So these points of integration are very, very important because geography cannot be studied in isolation. It has to be integrated, and that is what makes things more interesting for the children. Now we move on to the next point, and that is learning objectives. Now, as per NEP 2020, the learning objectives in geography should not just be defining terms or reciting or writing an explanation of geographical process. Students should be able to A, understand, and B, analyze. Now, let us see. I have taken some examples from class 6, class 7, and class 8. Considering what time I have at hand, I think we can take just one or two examples for each class. So let us have a look at class 6. On the understanding side, there is a question which I have put in. Why is 5:30 a.m. in London? Why it is 5:30 a.m. in London, UK, when it is 12 noon in India and 3:30 p.m. in Tokyo? Now, the child should be able to understand that while the Earth is moving on its axis, it is rotating on its axis. Day and night follow, and that is why places in the east have a time which is far ahead than the places in the west. So this concept has to be understood. And if this concept is understood, the child should be able to tell you Why it is 12:30 a.m. in London when it is 12 noon in India and 3:30 p.m. in Tokyo. Now, on the analysis side, let's have a look at the analysis side. How are large scale maps? How large scale maps are useful to architects and builders? Now, if you have taught large scale maps and you have said that the plans are also made, then how it is useful to architects and builders, the child should be able to understand that, okay, if my house is, let us say, 60 feet by 30 feet, or the plot is 60 feet by 30 feet, and my house has rooms which are 10, 12 feet, 12 or by 15, then how are they represented on a map? So, if the map is sufficiently large scale, it will be able to show the details of rooms and the details of the various spaces within a house. So the child should be able to analyze this concept after studying maps and the scale of the map. Now, in class 7, the question for understanding is why Shimla feels colder than Delhi in the month of May. So, if the child should has understood that for every 165 meters of ascent, the temperature roughly drops by 1 degree Celsius, and Shimla is at an altitude much higher than Delhi, then naturally Shimla is about 10 or 15 degrees cooler than Delhi. So this concept the child should understand. Now, in order to appreciate this concept and in order to come to this understanding, the child should know that while we go up in the environment, while we are climbing on Mount Everest, the climbers are using oxygen bottles and they are having a oxygen mask on their faces. The reason is that the oxygen level is dropping. Now, gases are becoming rarer, and when the gases are becoming rarer, the heat retained by these gases becomes less as you go up or climb up. Therefore, it becomes colder. So, this entire concept has to be understood. Then, on the analysis side, if we have a look, the difference between intensity and magnitude of an earthquake, the child should be able to understand. So, when he reads that the magnitude of the earth, Richter scale was 4.6, the earthquake was to some extent, I mean, like, it was not so devastating, but when it is 8 or 9 or 10 on the Richter scale, it becomes very devastating. But the question is that the intensity of the earthquake varies while the Richter magnitude is a constant figure. So the difference between these two should be analyzed by the child. Why this happens? Because the intensity of the earthquake continues to vary from the epicenter. As we move out of the epicenter, the intensity of the earthquake becomes less and less. So these two things should be very clearly explained so that the child is able to analyze the difference between the intensity and magnitude of an earthquake. Now in class 8, in the understanding side, why the government in India provides subsidies in agriculture inputs. So the child he reads that the government provides this, the government provides that, the government gives seeds, high yielding variety seeds, and it gives uh, fertilizers, and it is giving water, and so on and so forth. But and it is giving farm machinery on loans to the farmer. But why India is doing all this? Because the 51% of our area in India is arable land. It is fit for cultivation. A country where more than 50% area is fit for cultivation has to be a country whose economy is based on agriculture. And therefore, the government provides subsidies on agriculture to increase the farm output. Now, this is something which the child should be able to understand. And on the analysis side, let us have a question here that how rooftop solar panels and rooftop rainwater harvesting can augment power generation and groundwater level respectively. So, government is saying that you have a rooftop solar panel and it will generate electricity. People listen from 1 year and forget about it. So the child should be able to analyze that if we keep on generating electricity through solar panels, geographically our country is a warm and a hot country, and therefore we have abundant sunshine. And if this abundant sunshine can be converted into electricity, which can be fed into the grid, obviously the shortage of power can be overcome. And similarly, we have good amount of rainfall in the country because we are a monsoon climate. We have a monsoon climate, and this water, if it can be channelized into the ground, then the groundwater can be used in a sustained manner at a later stage. So the child should be able to analyze how solar panels and rainwater harvesting devices can be useful for the country. So these are the learning objectives, and we move on now to designing subject enrichment activities. So we begin with class 6. So we have class 6 here, and yes. Now I have given two examples here. One of them is demonstrating how to develop a sundial by observing the shadow of a vertical stick on the ground. In class 6, a subject enrichment activity is that ask the children to prepare a sundial. So what they have to do is they have to fix a vertical stick on the ground, and they have to observe the shadow of the stick. And as the sun moves from east to west, the shadow of the stick will continue to change. Now, this can be marked and can be used as a sundial to give you an approximate time. So, this is what we call as an open air clock. And if you can manage to ask a group of children to develop this kind of a clock, I think you've achieved quite a lot of things. And then the second activity which I have suggested here is enrichment activity is measuring the dimensions of the classroom and making a plan according to the scale. So let the children measure the classroom, let them use their scales or whatever it is. If they are in the school, I don't know. I hope that happens soon. But in case they are at home, they can measure their bedroom or drawing room or whichever whatever study room, whatever they want, and they can make a plan and they can put it across uh, during the class hours, and the teacher can see their plans online. Now, in class 7, the two activities that I have put forward are understanding the effect of kinetic energy in raindrops by comparing the splattering of loose soil with that of soil with grass. Now, this I wish I should have could have shown you how this experiment is to be done. I'll just very quickly explain it to you. What you have to do is that you have to take one particular petri dish, or you can take a plate, and you put some dry sand on it, and on the another plate you put some soil with some grass growing on it, and then what you do is that from about 10 feet above, you sprinkle water through a shower head. Now, when you sprinkle water on the dry sand, the sand will splitter outside. It will come out of the plate. And while you sprinkle water from 10 feet on a soil where grass is growing, no mud is going to come out. Now, this shows that the force, uh, the energy that the raindrop has so much of power that it can loosen the soil and it can cause erosion. So, the effect of the kinetic energy of the raindrops, this can be explained very nicely with this experiment. And then another thing that you can ask the class 7 children to do is to making a working model of the seismograph. Now, working model of the seismograph is that the seismograph has to take, it should be able to, this, even if if they make a drum which is not rotating, and if it is stagnant drum, but the stylus should move with the movement of the table, or shaking of the base where you have kept this model. So this is very simple, and I think if you have a look on YouTube, you will find how to make this. Now, in class 8, There are two things which I have put here. Number one is conducting a survey on workers in a metal fabrication work or automobile maintenance workshop to assess the educational and vocational training levels. Now, this survey would tell them that how many people who are working there have taken a formal or maybe informal kind of a vocational training or on job training, or and how many of them have gone into formal schooling or training, professional training, what you call. And the interesting part would be that we find that such metal fabrication works, which are of prime importance, and even workshop, automobile workshop, maintenance workshop, that they are really very important because there are so many automobiles running. You can correlate this, that if the automobiles are not maintained, they will cause pollution, and they will also cause breakdowns, and they may become a hazard to the traffic and may cause accidents. So maintenance of automobile is very, very important. Now the people who are doing it have to undergo certain vocational training. You will find that in good workshops, some people have undergone vocational training, but many of the people, the workers are not trained. So we can always create awareness of and the importance of training through our survey, and this comes as part of the human resources which is taught in class 8. The second thing is gathering information about vocational courses, vocational engagements for which courses are available, unavailable, such as vegetable gardening, ceramic painting, carpentry. So carpentry, you will hardly find any school there teaching carpentry. Of course, in certain good institutions, and these days the carpentry, the hobby, it comes under work experience. It is part of this mandatory part of the CBSE, and the schools. There are some schools which carry this, and then gardening also is done in certain schools. As as a gardening club is there, particularly in schools which are residential. But in general, the vocational courses are not available for this. But these are equally important for our social setup, social and social geographic setup. So these are experiential learning points which can be used by classes 6, 7, and 8. Moving ahead, and we move on to the assessing for learning, and the second part would be assessing the learning. So here are questions from class 6, 7, and 8. I have just selected one odd question. So first, you just see how you will make an assessment before teaching a particular topic, and then based on your teaching, how you will assess this information from the child. So create questions that allow assessing the student's inherent knowledge about the topic to be taught before the topic is taught. Planets move around the sun, but we are sitting here and not moving. Is it true or false? You hold a class discussion. You see that many children will say that no, we are not moving. While some smart children would come up and say, actually, the planets are moving around the sun because they learned this in class 3, 2, 3. So they know that planets are moving around the sun, and we are sitting on the planet, so we are also moving. Very few children would say this. Similarly, in class 7, scientists study the upper atmosphere from Antarctica. Now, my question is, why do they go so far? Why not they go where they are living? So you hold a class discussion. So what is the point of going to Antarctica and studying the climate there, upper atmosphere? And children would not come up. Would very few children would be able to tell you that the height of the troposphere or the elevation of the troposphere is just 8 kilometers in case of Antarctica, and it is always much more anywhere else in the world. Now, North Pole cannot be used, unfortunately, because it is we do not have a continuous land. Therefore, Antarctica is an ideal location for studying the atmosphere, upper atmosphere. Why? Because the layer of the upper atmosphere is easily accessible from there. Now, the for question for class 8 is jute production in India was very high before independence, but it fell after India was partitioned and independence came. So Bangladesh, or we could say East Pakistan at that time, was made, and the jute production fell. However, jute production has declined greatly ever since. But the interesting part is that it is not just that after independence the production fell. After some time, we were able to get back to the production, but again it started falling since the government does not support jute production. Now the question is, why, if the government is supporting not supporting jute production, or the people have given it up? Let's see what the children have to say. There will be many children who would be saying that government doesn't support, but we have a common tendency at homes and even in our own minds that the government is not doing its work. Maybe yes, but we are also not doing our work because in case uh, we perform our duties, the government automatically is able to perform its duties. Now, nobody would come to the point that plastic substitutes have become much cheaper for packaging, and therefore jute production has gone down in the entire world. Now, let's move on to the next part. You see what I have answered here, you'll see here. In assessing the learning, after a concept or a phenomena has been taught and discussed well with the students, we have to test their reasoning and application with such questions. So let's have a look at the question. The first question, please relate it to the previous slide, that when traveling in a train, often when one train passes by closely at a higher speed makes our train appear stationary. Now, if you remember, in the previous assessing for learning, we had asked the question that planets move and we are stationary. That was the concept. The same concept of relativity is applied here. When traveling in a train, often when one train passes by closely at a higher speed, it makes our train appear stationary. So, if the child is able to say this, even if 10% of the children are able to understand this particular concept or answer this question, it means your teaching has been successful. Let's come on to class 7. As I said earlier, the height of the troposphere is 8 kilometers above the poles. How is this useful? Now, if the children have been able to answer that we conduct, upper atmosphere studies from Antarctica, the height of the troposphere is 8 kilometers above the poles, and Antarctica is at the south pole, and therefore we use it. This is how it is useful. So, if the children are able to answer this, they have been able to correlate the teaching has been successful. And then jute was used mainly for gunny bags, but it is now replaced by synthetic bags. I have already told you this. How it has affected the jute industry. The jute industry people have switched over to other, the workers have switched over, and the farming of jute has declined, and people have started growing other cash crops instead of jute. So this is how assessing for learning and assessing the learning works. Now we move on to the next thing, and that is quick feedback to support learning. Now here, the key point is that you have to devise some multiple choice questions on knowledge, understanding, application, and skill, with the knowledge share not exceeding 30 to 40% of the total questions, and use a computer-based online test if possible. And I think you can also devise your own online test. Even a PowerPoint presentation can be used, for multiple choice questions. It's very simple, and easy to make. So make an assessment by exchanging the answer sheets among the students, and then making them mark the sheet based on the answers you call out. So what you do is you conduct a test, multiple choice question test, or a one word or one line test, and then you exchange the copies from one end of the class to the other end of the class, and you read out the answer. I assure you, children will never, make mistakes because they want to penalize the other guy. Oh, he's done a mistake, so they feel very happy about it. and your work is also done. And at the same time, question by question, you can keep answering, you can keep asking who has gone wrong and why he has gone wrong. So it would be a revision as well as the feedback. You can get the feedback. Now, once you get the feedback, you have to sort out the students according to their knowledge, understanding, application, and skill scores. So the knowledge score and understanding, application, and skill, all these scores have to be taken. And students who do not perform well in their understanding and analysis part segments may be attached with student tutors selected by you in the class. So some children would be good in understanding and application. Those children would become mentors, and they will have a group, 3, 4 children group, whom they are going to teach and in a friendly way create the necessity in them so that they learn and they come up to the mark. And after doing all this, conduct a quiz on the same topic for improvement and reinforcement. Now, here is one point I wish to remember. I was told about this point by one of my mentors in education, that if your class result is weak, after all this, you conduct a quiz, and if your class result is weak, it means you need to strengthen your teaching. Now, this is a quick feedback for you also, because you get the feedback that there is something somewhere is going wrong, and you have to take corrective necessary steps. We move on to the next thing, and that is smart management of resources and time. I think my time is also running out, so I have to also smartly manage the time because uh, we're running out of time. So, smart management of resources and time is, first you have to ensure that your class transactions are well planned and rehearsed thoroughly, especially when you are using digital content. So if you are not rehearsed, then God alone knows. If you are on a digital platform, you may be sharing your desktop instead of your presentation, or your audio may not be coming, the mic may not be working, or the camera may not be working. And if you even if you are in the school premises, and you are using an audiovisual aid or a computer or a panel or whatever it may be, you have to make sure that it is working. You have to spend certain time to ensure that everything is in proper order. And then augment the chalk and talk pedagogy with group activities, class quizzes, digital content display, and online referencing. I've been harping on this since the very beginning. Involve students in preparing quizzes and digital content, such as collecting online references and presentations. You can involve the children. Do this. Find out. Then enforce strict time management, as I'm doing now, during the quizzing and group activities. So time management is also equally important, because if we run out of time, we cannot have asked the school to say, no, no, I want 35 more, 10 more minutes. Madam, please, मेरा काम खत्म नहीं हुआ है अभी आप रुक जाइए जरा सा खत्म कर लो. No, nobody will do that. And similarly, if you are online, then you have to be ready on time. So this is the smart management of resources and time. And now we are moving on to certain tips to cope up with challenges. And these tips are very essential for teachers as far as I can understand, and I'm sure you will also appreciate it. That you have to browse the web for references regularly at pace with the academic calendar. You have to browse the web and regularly, because references keep changing and new references keep appearing. Then collect materials to be used during class transaction at a time of planning the lesson. So lesson planning, and whatever material you're going to display, whatever you're going to talk about, all this has to be planned. Then encourage students to undertake online quizzes hosted by the government. There are very good quizzes available by the government, and on different things like on the constitution, then on historical aspects, and on government policies. There's n number of things. If you open this https quiz.mygov.in, you will have a look at these quizzes. And then encourage students to help you to prepare their PPT. Give them the type text, or ask them to type, and ask them to develop the PPT. And thank those students publicly who have helped you. And use class participation, the last point, use class participation to devise a question bank for practice, and encourage students to prepare a docx, that is a word file of the same. And with this, I think we have come to the end of this teaching module. Now, I would just uh, talk about the first lady you saw, Patricia Cross. Patricia Cross said, teaching without learning is just talking. So make sure that your teaching is effective. I am taking an example here of this PowerPoint presentation which you have seen just now. It took me almost about 1.5 weeks to prepare this PowerPoint presentation because most of the graphics that you are seeing, I had to download these graphics and customize them to be put here so that while I'm speaking, this supported graphics gives you a soothing feeling. Now, this should initiate you to make something interesting for the children rather than, presenting the whole thing in a rote manner. And this is the basic key of teaching as initiated by the NEP 2020. Now, with this, I thank you all for participating in this workshop. I sincerely thank Shri Arvind Singh ji, the MD, Chairman and MD of the Kriti Group of Companies, for having prepared this, giving me the opportunity to host this webinar. I thank Ma'am Fardana Shakil for moderating this. And if you have any queries on a personal level, you can always write to me in my mail. Otherwise, you can send your queries and feedback to Fardana ma'am, or write directly to Kriti Prakashan. And with this, we come to an end of this session. I hope it was useful to you. Thank you very much, and good night.